Hey everyone, Scott Hansen here from NFL Red Zone. I hope you're checking out 1 hour of 5 Yard Rush, one of the best podcasts on NFL football in the UK.
What is happening, Rush Nation? Here we are. It is another waiver wire. Sorry, the last two haven't materialized. One was done as an article or a Twitter post. The other was done, it wasn't done at all, unfortunately, as I've been traveling quite a lot early parts of the week. But we're here, we're back with waiver wire. We're into week 7. At the end of this week, in 1 week from now, we'll be halfway through the fantasy regular season. So it's been an absolute whirlwind. We've got so much play behind us, but it also means we've got so much play ahead of us. And the waiver wire this week is going to be really important to make some key decisions, to look at our teams going forward, and to think about how we can try and turn some of those losses and some of those 500 or worse records into potential contenders to get us through into the playoffs. So let's keep this short and snappy today. We're going to start with the quarterback position, and I'm going to be honest with you, it is really, really thin. Really thin at quarterback. There isn't a lot of quarterbacks out there that are going to have a significant impact on your team. If I had to say who the best was right now, I'd have to say it's Justin Herbert, and he's been so heavily dropped. His ownership has dropped all the way down to 38%. Now, in most leagues, he'll probably still be owned because that name cachet. And he's been pretty below average or average at very best, and a lot of it's due to the scheme. However, we're starting to see that offense look a little bit more aligned. It's more comfortable with the way that with what Harbaugh is wanting to do, and we should start seeing, with the injuries at running back, we should start seeing more balls in the air. Then this passing offense get a bit better. They had the best outing effectively last week against a very, very good defense in the Denver Broncos. So we're now looking at Justin Herbert maybe just getting a little bit better. He is really only a desperation play. I wouldn't look to have him as a long-term play, but if you're needing to get bye week cover over the next 2 weeks, then Justin Herbert is probably as good as any. I wouldn't spend too much fab, just a couple of percent. Don't need to go absolutely mad. If I'm looking at other options, Tua Tagovailoa has been dropped all the way down to 35%. I'm not sure when he's back, but you have to look at his options and think, well, when he plays, he has that potential to be a top 10 fantasy quarterback. So if it is available in your league and you've got a bye coming in the next few weeks, he could be a reasonable play to have. If you've already had your bye week, then and your quarterback is a top 10 quarterback, then you can ignore this one. Then I'd probably look at, there's a combination of either Daniel Jones or Drake May. Drake May had a really good performance. 3 passing touchdowns in his first outing was very, very good. They've got the Jags on Sunday, the worst passing defense in the NFL, who were abysmal on Sunday in London. There is an argument that Drake May could be a really good bye week filler these next couple of weeks with the fixtures that he has. I like the upside, but you're going to have to buy the floor, which is very, very low with this Patriots offense. Or you could go with Daniel Jones, who has a much higher floor because of his rushing ability. Even when his team is putting on 7 points, he still ran for nearly 50 yards. So you're going to have a pretty steady stream of points there from Daniel Jones, but the ceiling is capped. It will be better with Malik Neighbors, and we expect Malik Neighbors to be back this week. All of these quarterback options come with risk. All of them don't come with a huge upside either. So it's really a desperation play, not worth more than a couple of percent of fab. We're now moving into the running back position, and there's quite a few that you could be adding. So they all have different sort of plus sides and downsides. The ones I think absolutely are worth a conversation. We'll start with Ty Chandler. Ty Chandler is 31% owned. There is question marks over Aaron Jones and Aaron Jones' fitness. If that is the case, then Ty Chandler is going to be a top 15, 16 running back next week or week 7. And with that in mind, he's got to be added. The question is the longevity of this. How long is Ty Chandler going to give you fantasy relevant production? And you have to really monitor the news, because I think if he does, it's a week, maybe 2 tops. So you don't want to commit too much fab, but he could net you a win. And so how much is a win worth? Depends on your situation. If you are, 2 and 5, 3 and 4, 4 and 3, or sorry, 2 and 4, 3 and 3, 4 and 2, that win is going to be far more valuable than if you're 0 or 1 win or 5 and 6 wins. And so if you're 5 and 0, a 5 and 1 or a 6 and 0 team, you should absolutely not really think about investing in Ty Chandler because the upside isn't really there for you. On those teams on the fringes where 1 win could make the difference, he's got to be worth a considerable add. But again, I stress this, he's a very short-term option. Just like this next man, Tyrone Tracy, 45% owned, so he's still available in over half of leagues. And again, I don't see there being, I guess with Tyrone Tracy, there's a slight more element that he'll be slightly more fantasy relevant for a bit longer. But having said that, I don't know how long he is going to. I think he really has a starter role for, at best, 1 week. Devin Singletary was ruled out fairly late, which meant I don't want to say he was really close to go, but he was in consideration to go until the start of the weekend. So maybe with another week, he gets closer to starting and maybe he can start, which all of a sudden tanks Tyrone Tracy's value. Tyrone Tracy might have a role in this offense, and he should have a role in this offense. How big is that? It's at best a running back 3 role. How valuable is that? Not a whole heap. If Singletary gets re-injured, does his value go up? Yes, it does. Tyrone Tracy should be owned, but be careful of how much you spend. Again, 5-6 wins, 0-1 wins, probably don't need to take the gamble here. You probably need to take a gamble on someone else or think about longer term. But in the immediacy of getting a win, that these two should be considered equally. Now for some names that, I'll add one more name to that mix, and that's Isaac Guerrero. Now, Isaac Guerrero, again, Jordan Mason got injured. They're very hazy with the details of how severe that injury is and how long he is likely to be out for. Could Jordan Mason suit up on Sunday? Probably can. Will he? We don't know. Does Isaac Guerrero hold long-term value? No, because within the next 3 weeks, we expect Christian McCaffrey to be back, and then Isaac Guerrero will be not a thing. And if Jordan Mason's back, I don't expect Isaac Guerrero to be a big thing. So again, we're looking at best again, another player, 1 or 2 week play. Again, 3% owned. There's some value. He should be owned. But if you're 5 or 6 wins or 0 and 1 win, he won't help you. He doesn't have that value. So you need to think about the short-term to long-term game. He holds for me more risk than the other two because when the rest of the cavalry is back, he holds no fantasy value. At least with Chandler, at least with Tyrone Tracy, you could say they're a flex-worthy play. They will get touches, and the upside is they're a handcuff. With Guerrero, there's nothing. He would need both players to be injured again in Mason McCaffrey in order to be relevant. So I'm a bit skeptical on Guerrero, but he needs to be added. So now we're going to talk about some players who should be added and with a view to a longer-term role. I'm going to start with the first one is Kimani Vidal. Kimani Vidal is 7% owned. He scored on Sunday. If you follow the Twitter at 5 Yard Rush, you would have seen I put out a desperation plays piece. And some of those pieces did hit. The one I left out last minute, Rashad Bateman, believe it or not, he hit. But he was one I definitely talked about a sort of off camera or off live. But Kimani Vidal, Darius Slayton, Spencer Rattler will put up somewhat of a relevant fantasy day on that sheet. So you have to look at those options and say, Kimani Vidal has a role going forward. And the reason he was on there is because Gus Edwards is on IR. He's going to be out at least the next 3 weeks, maybe longer. He scored a touchdown. The volume wasn't quite what I expected it to be. I expected him to have a few more touches than he did. Having said that, he looked explosive in the plays that he did have the ball. And he definitely looks like he's going to be a good, suitable alternative to just giving J.K. Dobbins the rock. And I think against opposition where the defense isn't quite as strong as the Denver Broncos, he will have more opportunities, and he'll have an opportunity to get ahead and get himself 10 to 12 touches a game. And that role of his can only grow. He could effectively fade Gus Edwards to where he is not a thing when he comes back, because he can do so well in the interim. And, my feeling with Vidal, as with a lot of people, was at the start, not going to get a look in. Towards the end of the season, he could have a prominent role. That is well on the cards now. He is worth a long-term ad. You should be putting in 5 to 10% fab remaining for Vidal, because he is someone who will have some fantasy appeal going forward. The next is Jaylen Warren, 43% owned. This is coming off the back of Najee Harris having a 100-yard game for the first time all season, which is, you would say, strange timing. But having said that, you will also say he's almost exclusively had the role to himself, and in 6 weeks he's managed 100 yards once. And that's the way I look at this conversation. It's okay, yeah, great, he got 100 yards. Good for him. But didn't look explosive. Took a decent... I mean, he looked good, but he didn't look like the Najee when he first came onto the scenes. And so Jaylen Warren, pass-catching ability, slightly more explosive, coming in, earning touches, earning role. He was always going to be a significant part of this offense, but has been injured. It's time for Jaylen Warren to start seeing his role grow, and it will become more of a 50-50 share over the next couple of weeks. Now, again, we're looking at maybe a low-end RB2, but that's a sustainable role. And if something happens to Najee Harris, it goes significantly up. So Jaylen Warren is someone you should be bidding 5-6% of fab for, and you should definitely get that in there. Tyler Algier is another one, 37% owned. I told people all season that Bijan was not going to be a bell cow, and we've seen it in games where the Atlanta Falcons are comfortable when they're winning the game quite comfortably, that they're going to rely on Tyler Algier. The Falcons are a fairly good team, as we expected. They will be up in quite a few games. Tyler Algier will have a role in quite a few games. He is very game script dependent, and he is going to have games where he's going to be a bit of a bust. But he's a handcuff with a viable role moving forward, and he is someone that you should consider for your team. He's worth 5% of fab. He's worth having on your roster because he put 100 yards up at the weekend, and against bad teams, he's going to absolutely do that. And there's also this goal line ability that he carries as well. So I really like having him on some rosters, especially in the deeper leagues. Braylon Allen refusing to go away, 43% owned. He is talked up a little bit more in other circles than mine. I still lean that everything that the Jets need to do now should funnel through Breece Hall. There was an opportunity last night on the game losing turnover, I guess is what I'm going to call it, where Breece Hall is completely open and he is ignored. They turn the football over. That's the end of the football game. And that they need to go back to Breece Hall being the thing. He is the dynamic weapon in this offense. And when the Jets were grinding out wins last year, he was getting a huge touch rate. I'm not really on the Braylon Allen fan wagon, but he's a good player. Don't get me wrong. It's not the way I would utilize him, but at the moment, you have to accept the fact that he has a much bigger role in this offense than I think he should. And so, I wouldn't be doing my job in analyzing players and thinking about picking up players if I didn't call it out that it's not what I would do, but he has got a very significant role right now, and he's worth picking up. Is there a seismic shift back to Breece Hall? Is there something wrong with Breece Hall? These are questions that we do not know. So you have to go on what we're seeing as a body of work. Last night, Braylon Allen got a significant amount of work. He's got to be owned. He is going to be worth 5% of fab. And now let's look at some home run shots here. Ray Davis had a phenomenal game last night, 12% owned. And he had a phenomenal outing. And James Cook, we don't know what he's dealing with. He was a very late scratch. Maybe that means James Cook is coming back. Maybe the genie is out the bottle now, and maybe they start thinking, well, Ray Davis really, really got us a W. Maybe we need to incorporate him more. And that level of mystique is interesting, and he's worth a significant fab bid given what he did last night. We shouldn't be walking into this saying, well, it's his job. James Cook is not a thing. That's not how you can look at this situation. But we have seen many situations in the past in the NFL where we've seen the incumbent get an injury, the backup comes in, he does a good job, and he gets a role. The same could be said for Sean Tucker. Question marks now on what Rachaad White's future looks like. I think Rachaad White will be fine. But you have to accept the fact that Sean Tucker is out there and the genie is out of the bottle, and they were explosive. And the Buccaneers put up more rushing, it's the third most rushing yards in franchise history on Sunday in New Orleans. These situations, when the genie is out of the bottle, it is very, very difficult to put it back in. And so I look at these chaos players like Ray Davis, like Sean Tucker, and you've got to take a speculative ad. Now, if people want to overpay, make them overpay. But if they're there for 3% of fab, you've got to snap them up, because if they can all of a sudden generate and regenerate these numbers again, you're going to get W's out of it. It's a risk, but it's definitely a risk worth taking. But you've got to cut some of the fat on your rosters to do that. Last, hitting hopes here from the running back position. And I would say Blake Corum is finally cemented as the number 2. If something happens to Kyron Williams, he is the handcuff. He will get a seismic role. Ronnie Rivers is finished in this offense now. It is Blake Corum who is getting the second backup snaps. Not fantasy worthy as it stands. If something happens to Kyron Williams, who's never played more than 12 games in the season, then all of a sudden Blake Corum's the guy. Beat the waiver wire, pick him up, and you never know what might happen there. And the same can be said for Trey Benson in Arizona. He is slightly more owned, 20%. If something happens to James Conner, as it has done in the past, Trey Benson's similar. Copy and paste for those two. Let's look at the wide receiver position. I'm still amazed that Josh Downs is under 50% owned. He's 49% owned, and he's still continuing to put up numbers. I question what it looks like under Anthony Richardson. I'll be honest with you, it's very hard. We haven't seen what that picture looks like this year. But under Joe Flacco, he's been really, really good. And he is a high target read in this offense and a big-time playmaker. He's got to be owned. He's got to be paid. You got to get that fab in bid with him, and he's definitely one that I would be adding. The one that no one is really talking about this week that I would be adding is Juju Smith-Schuster. The bottom line is KC are going to come out of the bye, and they're going to need to do something. Rashee Rice is done for the season. Xavier Worthy is not going to get the ball 7-8 times a game. We have seen this. So who is going to get the ball? Someone has to. It's not going to be Kelsey exclusively. They need someone on the outside. It's likely to be Juju Smith-Schuster. Juju Smith-Schuster is the most likely target in this offense. He is worth that speculative ad. He is going to have weeks where he's going to drive you absolutely nuts, and he's going to have weeks where he puts up wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 flex numbers. And so that's what you're getting for that bye week cover and that opportunity. He is worth the pickup. And for me, he is one of the top ads this week. Christian Watson was dropped quite a lot with the injuries. We see he is a big-time playmaker, and with no Dontavian Wicks now for the next few weeks, it's likely that Watson, if he can stay healthy, will get targets in this offense. 43% owned. He's worth that ad. It's going to be a nightmare again to selecting him every week. He's got such a low floor and such a high ceiling. But those boom-bust players, if you play him in the right weeks, will give you significant outcomes towards making the playoffs. And I would much rather have a guy who can put up 20, 22 points in a week than just a guy who is a low-end flex-worthy play who might get me 12. Or he might get me 6 to 12. I'd rather get a guy who's like 2 to 22. Give me the ceiling. Give me Christian Watson this week. He's well worth that ad. Romeo Doubs is 32% owned. He found the end zone twice. I actually have Doubs over Watson. I think Doubs has a better skill set. I think Doubs is going to have more of the opportunities and the target share moving forward. I found it very interesting that on his first touchdown, the whole team huddled around him and gave him a cuddle. That was a very strong statement from the players that they support Romeo Doubs in his decision to sit out. That's significant, because if the players are with him and Jordan Love is with him, then he will have a role. And that was really telling and really important when watching that. So Romeo Dobbs, I have over Christian Watson, but you can see the argument both ways. Both of these guys need to be added significantly more. Alan Lazard, 40% owned, is still getting the rock. He scores a Hail Mary touchdown yesterday, did well to go up and get it. He had 22 fantasy points yesterday. Listen, he's a thing. Whether we like it or not, we're in 2024, and Alan Lazard is almost one of the primary targets to Aaron Rodgers and the Jets. And it's not amazing or sexy, but he is a flex-worthy play most weeks. Alan Lazard needs to be picked up and picked up often. And I also like having Rashad Bateman, 9% owned. The usage isn't there, but if you need someone who's going to get you 10 points in a desperation play, then Rashad Bateman is there. What's my fab bid on all of these guys? It's going to be somewhere with the Dobbs and the Watsons of the world, probably closer to 7% of fab. Josh Downs, I'd be happy to go even as high as 10% of fab. I would say the rest are all closer to sort of 5 to 3% of fab. You can also throw Xavier Legette in there, 24% owned. He is someone that you can pick up. He's going to have flex-worthy numbers. I don't know if the ceiling is there is the big question. Let's talk tight ends. It's very thin out there in the tight end world. Zach Ertz, 39% owned. He's a player I've owned in so many leagues because I just didn't bother drafting tight end and just picked up Zach Ertz. He's a big part of this offense. He's a plodder. He'll get you 8 points a week, and that's kind of what you need at the position to not die. And that is really his value. If you're looking for more of a touchdown boom, you've got two options this week, Cade Otton or Hunter Henry. Cade Otton's 30% owned, Hunter Henry 22% owned. Both can find the end zone. Both are a touchdown threat for their teams, and there will be some output for them. Again, we're looking at 8-10 points. It's not really a huge position you want to invest in. All these bids, 3% or less. Pick a guy, go for him. Ertz, steady, consistent. Not going to score a lot of touchdowns, but he's got a steady, consistent role. Otton and Henry can get you a touchdown. Maybe they give you a little cream and creep over 10 points. They're your bets. That's what you're kind of looking at. Taysom Hill's been dropped with his injury, 28% owned. He's that chaos factor. He can run Wildcat. He can get the carries to run him in. He, again, has that chaos theory. He's either going to give you a 0 or he's going to give you a high number. He probably has the highest ceiling of all of these players. So, again, for that chaos factor, you can look at him. If you want to look for someone who has another steady stream, Noah Fant, 17% owned. I talked about him all offseason. Again, another player I've got loads of. Again, because I didn't draft tight end. Steady stream, 6 to 10 points. Nothing sexy, nothing great. And there we go. Have a look at him and pick him up because he will offer you some value. Just a nice steady play. And then the last one, and this is a bit of a chaos play, is Grant Calcaterra, I think is how it's pronounced. Calcaterra. That is how I'm interpreting it. Grant Calcaterra, 0% owned. He's the backup tight end in Philly. If there is an issue with Dallas Goedert, we have not heard as of yet what that is. I know he missed the entire game if he's in the concussion protocol or he's nursing that injury. If there's a further injury diagnosis that we're waiting to hear back from and he misses this week, then Grant Calcaterra looks like he's going to have a start. And that's a worthy role to have in this offense. So keep an eye on that. If we're looking at defenses this week, the big three that you can target, the Cincinnati Bengals, the New Orleans Saints, or the Indianapolis Colts, all three have the best matchups this week. And if you're looking at kickers, Austin Seibert, Cam Dicker, or Jason Myers, they're your DSTs and kicker plays. That's going to do it. Went a bit longer than I expected. But thank you so much for tuning in. Good luck. We're heading to week 7. Stay tuned tonight. I'm looking forward to hearing more from the rest of you. Bring your questions, bring your roster questions, bring your roster thoughts. I'm looking forward to hearing all of them over the course of the evening. And I'm looking forward to chatting it with all of you, with stocks and with company. So until then, Rush Nation, don't forget, as always, keep rushing.